lack of visibility or screening there will be. On the other hand, to the west, to the east of the project site, we have hills, topography, landscape, tree cover, and the like, and so the visibility in the land portion of the project area is fairly limited. The difference between these two viewshed maps is one marks and measures the visibility from the hub, the actual turbine of the individual wind energy turbine, and the other one measures the visibility from the highest point of the tip, the rotor, the blade of the turbine. And actually what you find, interestingly enough, is that the visibility between those two is not dramatically different. A little more visibility with the tip, obviously, because it tends to be higher than the turbine, but as you get out and given the topography, generally you're looking at screening and vegetation which are going to block the view. We tend to use a standard height of 40 feet in most of our projects. That's a conservative height for trees. Many of the trees on the project site, which we went out and measured, are actually 50 to 55 feet height. So that's maybe an underestimation. And the higher the trees surrounding the project and beyond the project, the more the visibility might be reduced. So we start with mapping it, and then we identify sensitive areas, scenic and recreational locations, and we assess how important, how used, how accessible they are. We look at town plans, we look at regional plans, we look at websites, we look at books that talk about the area and how people use, recreate, and recreate in the area. We consider scenic values, places that have been identified over time as being important from a scenic resource and important to the community. And we visit all of the sites that have potential visibility, and often some that don't, just to ensure and to check that these maps are providing us with the appropriate data. So we go out and individually visit, we do field work all around the region. We drive the roads, we go to Fairfield Pond, we come and check to make sure what the visibility might be here in the town center, of which there is none. Then we walk through methodology, again, accepted nationally and locally and regionally, that tries to assess the effect of the visual change and the effect of that change on individuals who are using resources. We do look at the whole area, but typically in accepted practice before Public Service Board, New Hampshire review bodies, the Maine Department of Environmental Protection, and the bodies that review these projects, the emphasis is not on each individual private residence. We can't possibly assess visual change at every single resident in this project area. We don't have access to those residents, and visual assessment asks where the change is going to affect public resources, scenic resources, and places where people congregate. So where the greatest change and the greatest potential effect will occur. And so we assess using data that's available to us, on-site analysis and tabulation and observation, the types of uses that go on in different areas like Fairfield Pond, like the rail trail, those types of resources, to get a feeling for how different users of those types of resources will be affected by a wind energy project. Give you an example. In Maine, where there are a lot of wind energy projects on ridges low and high, high points, hilltops, so forth, one of the primary users of those types of facilities in the winter are snowmobilers. We found that snowmobilers actually really like wind energy projects because many wind energy projects provide access to places they might have not been able to get to, and in fact support that. One of the wind energy projects in Maine that we worked on every year has an event for snowmobilers. It's very popular. So we look at how different users are affected potentially by the project if it's built. And we go through an analysis that assesses a number of very specific criteria. How close are you to the project? How many turbines are you going to see? How does that project look in the landscape from that vantage point? Is it overly dominant? Is it extensive? How much of your view, for example, will be changed or altered because of the wind energy project. For example, on a pond, as I'm sure you would understand, the user of a pond, whether you're fishing, whether you're motorboating, whether you're swimming or paddling, has a 360-degree view in the water. You can see in any direction. So you may be looking at a wind turbine, but that wind turbine might occupy 5% or 10% or 20% of the view, depending on the breadth of the project in the landscape from that vantage point. So we go through a step-by-step process, again, that has been agreed upon and accepted in a number of different venues to assess the potential effect of the project. And one of the other tools that we use, obviously, and that people want to see are visual simulations. And what will the project look like from different vantage points in the project area. So we've done a number of visual simulations for this project. For example, here is what the project's going to look like from, I think it's about over 9 miles away from Burton Island State Park. And actually you can see the turbines in here. You have to come up a little bit closer. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the technique that we use and talk about the veracity of that technique in a minute. Here would be the view from the Missisquoi Valley Rail Trail in St. Albans. And we've got a map that locates where the view is. This is what the project will look like from around here, so the board can see. This is from a distance of 1.24 miles. So that's obviously a closer view. The Paquette Drive, which is also right in St. Albans, but also right on the edge of Swanton. This is an area that actually Landworks worked with the town to look at as a growth area for the town. This is, again, see the distance, about 2.16 miles away, and here's what the project will look like from that location in Swanton.
I think that's by Handy Chevrolet, isn't it?
Yes, it's near to that. Absolutely, it's just outside of St. Albans. And then pull this out. Pull that out. By Handy Chevrolet. So visual simulations are very important for us to get a sense of obviously what the project will look like. Here's the view from Fairfield Pond, which is about, this view is from the boat launch at Fairfield Pond, and the distance of the nearest turbine in this view is about 2.25 miles. So let me just say a couple of things about visual simulations. It's very important to understand that visual simulations are static, limited representations of what you're going to do from only a single point. And I think we would all understand that the project may be visible from a number of other points in the project area, the 10-mile radius, and may not be visible from a whole bunch of other points. So there is some visibility in places where there's no visibility. And these only give you a snapshot from what we consider to be important or sensitive areas that should be reviewed for visual simulation purposes and understanding the project, but they don't give you the whole picture. And I'm going to sort of jump ahead a little bit to the end and say how we prepare visual simulations is a highly technical, step-by-step process that involves 3 or 4 different software platforms: Photoshop, GIS, CAD, some people use SketchUp, that you walk through step-by-step to ensure, and I want to really emphasize this, to ensure that these visual simulations are as accurate and representative of the project as they absolutely can be. Now again, they're just simulations. You're seeing these pictures at one point in time, from one place, under one set of atmospheric conditions. And so you have to take that into account. I have found, over 30 years of experience in this type of work, that a visual simulation is a good point of departure, but you need to also take into account the whole experience of the resource. So I have gone out to many projects, and we've done post-construction reviews of different projects. A, to test the veracity of our visual simulations and their accuracy, and B, to understand what the visual effect was before and after and how it affected the use. And we found that when you're involved in a three-dimensional, 360-degree environment, where if you're paddling, for example, where there are waves, there are other boaters, there's shoreline, there's weather conditions, and there's shoreline. There's things that you can look at that, and you can't simply focus on that view. There are other things that you enjoy, and it doesn't necessarily diminish your experience. We've gone to state parks that are in full view of wind energy projects. Crystal Lake in Barton, after the Sheffield project was built, May Pond in Pillsbury State Park, after the Lemster project was built, and we found interviewed rangers, looked at visitor counts. Visitor counts have not gone down, they've gone up in all those resources. The rangers who've run those places have told us, yes, they get comments from people, some like them, some don't, but no one really complains about them. I've documented that, and I have excerpts from rangers' logs, and I have found personally, as an avid outdoors person, that in some instances, in many instances, the visual effect that you might be focused on with one single simulation is much different than what you experience in actuality in real time. I want to just say that I know that there are folks who have difference of opinions about this, and I know that folks have, and often do, prepare their versions of visual simulations. I'm going to sit here and tell you right now, there is no upside for us to create a visual simulation that is anything but the most accurate, true representation that we can possibly do, given the tools we have available to us. And we have presented these visual simulations, as I mentioned, before many different regulatory review bodies, and we have never been questioned about the veracity or the reliability of those simulations. Folks who obviously and rightfully want to have an understanding may try, using Photoshop or Google Earth to create their own simulations. We have found, unless you go through a step-by-step, very involved, highly technical process to produce these types of simulations, there are going to be inaccuracies. And we found that, frankly, with a number of the simulations that have circulated about this project, that they're inaccurate, they don't represent what you're actually going to see, they over-represent, and they can't be relied on. And so our visual simulations, again, there's no upside for us to misrepresent the project. These are true and accurate, and I would swear, and do swear, under oath to that effect. In terms of the project itself, we also, as I mentioned, look at regional context and try to understand the setting and the fit of the project. One thing you have to understand, I'm sure you do, about wind is that you can't hide it. Wind energy is going to be visible. Because it is visible, doesn't automatically translate into an unacceptable or unreasonable impact. And all of the regulatory bodies in New England have stated that and follow that basis for their review. That doesn't mean that some projects won't have unacceptable impacts, but based on our look at this project, we found there's some interesting contextual factors that help this project fit within the overall landscape. First of all, Lake Champlain is 5 or 6 miles away. We already have experience with the Georgia Wind project to know that the impacts there have been acceptable and haven't changed users' enjoyment and user numbers in state parks. This area obviously has Georgia Wind. It has the project across the lake, which is in Clinton County in New York, which you can see off in the distance. There's even a residential scale wind turbine visible right from the boat launch at Fairfield Pond. There are solar installations, there are utility installations up and down the valley, radar towers, telecommunication towers. This is a developed area. People live here, to be sure, and they are going to see the project, but there's always this conundrum of where does that wind energy belong? Should it be where the people use the energy, or should it be off in a remote place that is unfettered and undeveloped? I think that we're seeing, for example, with solar, that we want the energy close to where we are, and we are getting our arms around its place and its presence in the landscape. The mitigating qualities of the site, I think, are also important. You heard Dory talk about the environmental issues. One of the things we look at, and I know it's hard for us to get our arms around this, but this is a working landscape, as sure as Travis and Ashley Sugar, their property, as sure as their farmland all around it. Vermont has a long tradition of the working landscape that tap into our natural resources. Wind is a natural resource, and I don't think it's a huge leap to understand that wind energy or solar energy are also part in the new energy landscape in the 21st century of that working landscape. One of the key
Question?
Yes, I'm just about done.
Okay, great.
With my presentation. So, I mean, I think closing comments I would make are that we, again, as I said a moment ago, we found that the concern and the issues and the worry about these types of projects, whether they're solar, whether they're wind, whether they're transmission, are heightened in the process leading up to their review and construction. And rightfully so. Often we're concerned about what we don't know, we're concerned about what we may see or not see, and we don't really understand how this might change our experience. Again, as I said a moment ago, through our studies, through post-construction research that's been done for Searsburg and other projects in Maine that we've researched and studied, the findings have been that the concerns before the project were built have not been borne out after they've been constructed. People still are able to fish in clean waters, paddle on beautiful ponds, and enjoy the landscape. That doesn't mean that some of you, I'm sure, here have objections or concerns about wind energy. And I think, and in this location. And I think one thing I would leave you with is that, and something I certainly can't change, but how we view and how we respond to wind energy in the landscape depends on how we view wind energy in general. If we think turbines are beautiful examples of industrial design and represent a form, that follows the function in a beautiful way, I mean, they look a lot better than coal power plants, for example, then we can get our arms around wind energy, and they won't trouble us if we see them in the landscape or if we're paddling and we discover wind energy in the views. If we don't accept or buy into the need or the validity of wind energy, then chances are you're going to be less happy, both before and after the project's built. And I understand that and accept that, and certainly we are all entitled to our opinions. But I think we have to understand that in the review of this process, starting back to the beginning, and I'll be done, we have to understand that for this type of energy, there will be some visibility, there will be some visual effect. And what we found is that the overall effects that this project will result in do not rise to a level that is unreasonable. And I think I will leave it at that.
First of all, I should have said welcome back to Swanton. I knew I seen you.
Yeah, well, I don't look you at.
Okay.
Nothing about sound. Opinion.
Come up the interstate and you see the Milton project or what's that distance from? I'm just trying to compare it with.
I think it's a couple of miles, 3 miles perhaps.
Okay.
I could tell you specifically. I have a map here, but let's see, we're right here. Well, we're not far enough down. Yeah, it's under 5 miles. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Thank you.
That's not the most important thing. The most important thing, and I sleep at night and I'm living 2,200 feet away from
I am not the person who deals with the sound effects, so I can't respond right now.
We always know this.
Yeah, I understand that you're making a study of, as you travel around, and the impact of people that potentially just visit an area. But we're concerned about the people that are going to be living in the area day in and day out. And that's a different point of view.
We do take that into account, absolutely. We do not ignore the fact that local residents are going to have to live with this. And what we try to do is assess to what extent will the change in the landscape and the visual effect from the project affect your everyday life. Is it going to be omnipresent? Is it going to be overly dominant? Or is it going to be reasonable in terms of how much you're going to do it and how much you're not going to.
The sound.
We'll make sure that the chairs are very low